Marie had been paralyzed for 10 long years. It had been a decade since the stroke that had taken her mobility and much of her independence. And in all those years, her children, Lauren and Brad, had barely lifted a finger. Oh, sure, they sent their occasional check-in messages, but never when it truly mattered. They took their vacations, lived their lives, without a care in the world. They thought their freedom was worth more than their mother's needs, than her suffering. But I was here, always here, and nobody ever asked me if I was okay, if I wanted to go anywhere, do anything. Instead, I was the one who stayed behind, year after year, tending to her every need. And that was fine. I did it out of love. But in the end, when the lawyer read Marie's will, all those years of sacrifice were worth nothing. Lauren, Marie's daughter, had a way of making me feel small without even trying. She never missed a chance to throw a sharp remark my way. Even today, after all these years of tending to her mother, she still saw me as little more than a housekeeper. She looked at me with disdain, as if I were a servant in her eyes. The will reading was the final straw. She barely acknowledged me, much less thanked me for the countless hours I'd spent looking after their mother. When it was time to divvy up Marie's assets, Lauren's voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'm the daughter," she had said, as if that entitled her to everything. Brad, her brother, wasn't much better. He was always too busy, wrapped up in his own world to care about the family, especially their mother. The wealth that was being passed down felt like an afterthought to him. His indifference was the sharpest of them all. But once I started cleaning out that old house, the one they'd dismissed as worthless, I stumbled upon something I never could have imagined. I thought I was just sifting through the remnants of Marie's life, old knickknacks, faded photographs, broken furniture. The house smelled like dust, like the past, like forgotten things. But as I bent down to clean the narrow hallway, I noticed something odd. There, beneath a section of the creaky wooden floorboards, was a gap. Not big, but enough to catch my eye. Curiosity got the better of me. I pried the board loose, and what I found beneath it took my breath away. Bundles of money, tightly wrapped in rubber bands, all of it fresh and crisp, sitting in the dark like a hidden treasure. $300,000. How could this be? Why would Marie, who lived so simply, hide this here? I remember holding the money in my hands, staring at it as if I'd discovered some dark secret, something I wasn't meant to know. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. What was going on? Why hadn't anyone told me about this? Why didn't anyone ever mention this stash of cash? Marie had never been extravagant, never indulged in luxuries. And yet, here it was, proof that there was more to her life than I had ever known. That final morning, sunlight spilled through the window, casting a gentle glow on Marie's face. Her complexion seemed a little brighter than usual, a deceptive peace. Her breathing was shallow, the sounds of her struggle mixing with the soft rustling of the curtains in the breeze. I watched her for hours that day, waiting for her to wake, to say something, anything. But she never did. She had been slipping away piece by piece, and I had been there by her side the entire time. When the nurse came in to check her vitals, I stepped out of the room for a moment to catch my breath. That's when I heard the news. The nurse had walked up to me with a serious expression, her eyes avoiding mine. "Kylie," she had said, her voice strained, "I'm afraid she's gone." The funeral was a blur. The days after it, even more so. All the while, I was left to process everything, to wrestle with the strange discovery of the money and what it meant for me. Marie's children, so distant and so disinterested, didn't notice it. They didn't care about anything but the inheritance. But I knew this wasn't just about the money. It was about the years of silence, the unacknowledged sacrifices, the pain of being invisible. And as I stood there, surrounded by Marie's empty house, the weight of the secret in my hands, I knew that everything was about to change. The discovery of the money left me in a state of disbelief, but it also ignited something within me. For so long, I had been content with staying in the background, serving, helping, being the silent caregiver. But now, as I stood in that empty house, with the weight of the hidden cash in my hands, I realized that I had been wrong all along. All those years of self-sacrifice, of giving up my own life for Marie and her children, had meant nothing, or so I thought. But this money, this hidden wealth, was a sign, signifying that perhaps there was something more for me to claim, something I deserved. I left the house that night, the air thick with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. My mind raced with possibilities. The money was a ticket out, a way to escape the life I had built around serving others, always putting their needs before my own. But what should I do with it? The rational part of me told me to leave it behind, to walk away and pretend I had never seen it. The other part, the one that had been ignored, dismissed and overlooked for so long, told me that this was my moment, my chance to finally have something that was truly mine. The next few days were filled with confusion and conflicting emotions. The family was too wrapped up in their own drama to notice anything. Lauren, who had always expected everything to be handed to her, was already planning how to divide the inheritance. Brad was nowhere to be found, still playing the part of the absentee son. The attorney handling the will had scheduled meetings, but none of them seemed to care about the details. They were so caught up in their own greed and sense of entitlement that they never once stopped to consider the people like me, the ones who had given up everything just to be there for their mother when she needed it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The money was too much of a coincidence. It was too carefully hidden, too well kept. Marie had known what she was doing. She had planned this, perhaps not for me, but certainly for someone who would be able to take what had been left behind. Was it me? Or was I just another pawn in the larger scheme of things? That thought gnawed at me, but I couldn't help myself. I had to find out. I didn't tell anyone about the discovery. Instead, I set out to learn everything I could. The money had been hidden under that floorboard for a reason, and I needed to understand why. I began researching Marie's past, looking into her financial history, her investments, her relationships. There had to be a reason for this stash, and soon enough, I uncovered something startling, a life insurance policy, one that she had taken out years ago, one that had a sizable payout. The policy had a beneficiary listed, someone who had been in her life for only a short time, but who had undoubtedly left a mark. It wasn't Lauren. It wasn't Brad. The beneficiary was me. It felt like the ground beneath me shifted. I wasn't just an overlooked caregiver anymore. I was someone who had been trusted, even if it was in secret. Marie had left me everything, her money, her legacy, without a word to anyone. And now I had a choice to make. The temptation to claim what was mine was overpowering. For the first time, I felt like I was on equal footing with the others, like I had the upper hand. But there was a problem. I couldn't do it alone. I had spent so many years tending to Marie's needs, doing everything for her, and now I was left with a mess I wasn't prepared to clean up. The money wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. In the days that followed, I was consumed by the enormity of the situation. The more I learned, the more I realized that Marie had not left me just money. She had left me a puzzle, one that would take all of my strength and determination to solve. The children, especially Lauren, would never understand. They would never accept it. But for once, I didn't care. What I didn't know then was that the money would lead me down a dark and twisted path, one filled with lies, betrayal, and threats that I hadn't seen coming. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a family. No, a broken set of people who would do anything to protect what they thought was theirs. And I was about to become their worst nightmare. The deeper I dug, the more unsettling the truth became. The money, the insurance policy, Marie's secrets, it all painted a picture I hadn't expected. I thought I was being cautious, taking it slow, but the world around me was spinning faster than I could keep up. As I stood there, staring at the insurance policy and all its cryptic clauses, I realized I wasn't just dealing with family dynamics anymore. I was stepping into a web of lies, manipulation, and hidden motives that I was never meant to uncover. Lauren's obsession with securing her inheritance was becoming more apparent by the day. She acted as if the house and the money were already hers, making arrangements to sell off pieces of property, as if the will had already been read. She didn't know it yet, but she had made a dangerous enemy in me. She was just a pawn in the game, like I had been, like everyone else had been. But I was starting to see the strings pulling each of us, strings I was now intent on cutting. Brad had vanished as usual, only showing up when it was convenient. He never called, never checked in, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. The way he avoided eye contact during the few times I saw him, the way his expression seemed to darken when I mentioned Marie's will, it was all too calculated, too deliberate. It was as though he had a stake in something he wasn't willing to share, and I couldn't help but wonder how deep the deception went. But none of this mattered yet. The first thing I had to do was act quickly. The more I learned about Marie's past dealings and the shadowy financial schemes she had been involved in, the more I realized I wasn't just a passive observer in this mess. I was part of it now. The question was, how far would I go to get what was mine? The following weeks were a blur. I hired a lawyer, a discreet, sharp one who had worked with cases like this before. She was no stranger to tangled family disputes and financial chaos, and I knew I needed someone who understood how to maneuver through these treacherous waters. But even with her help, I had to be careful. I couldn't let anyone know what I had discovered. Not yet. The element of surprise was my only advantage. Lauren continued to push forward, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her feet. She began making plans for the family property, hiring contractors, and planning renovations. She wanted it all, and she was going to take it no matter the cost. But she had no idea what I was about to unleash. And then there was Brad. He finally returned, looking disheveled, as though life had gotten the best of him. I had no idea where he had been, but I could tell he wasn't here just for a casual visit. There was something in his eyes, something guarded, something desperate. He didn't say much when we talked, but his body language spoke volumes. He was hiding something, something big. I just had to figure out what. I had to get to the truth of what was really happening behind closed doors. Why had Marie hidden all of this from the rest of the family? Why had she chosen to give me everything and leave them nothing? There were too many questions, too many loose ends, and I wasn't about to leave any stone unturned. One night, while the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, I took another look at the old letters I had found hidden in the attic. They were from an old business partner of Marie's, someone I had never heard of before. The letters were dated years ago, and they painted a picture of a woman who wasn't just the sweet, caring mother I had always known. She had been ruthless, calculating, strategic. She had a plan, and everything she had done, every secret she had kept, had been for one reason: to protect her legacy. And that legacy, I realized, wasn't just money, it was power. The power to control the family, to manipulate the narrative, to ensure that everything went according to her design. The more I pieced together from those letters, the more I understood. Marie had left behind a blueprint for how to rise above, how to claim everything for myself and hold on to it. But there was a price. The morning after I made these discoveries, I met with my lawyer again. The weight of what I had uncovered pressed heavily on my shoulders, but I was resolute. I couldn't turn back now. The game had changed, and I was no longer the silent participant. I was the one in control. She looked at me across the desk, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low. "I'm sure," I said, my tone firm. "Let's move forward." It was time to play my hand. The family didn't know it yet, but they were about to find out exactly who they were dealing with. No more secrets, no more hiding in the shadows. The tables were about to turn, and I was finally ready to take what was mine. The next few days were critical. I met with my lawyer several times, meticulously planning each move. Every word I said, every action I took had to be calculated. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about the bigger picture. It was about power. It was about getting control over everything that had been hidden from me for so long. Lauren continued with her renovations, oblivious to the storm that was coming, but I could see her anxiety growing. She was trying so hard to keep everything under control, to assert dominance over the property and its future, but there were cracks in her plan. I could sense that she was beginning to panic. The illusion of control was slipping, and she had no idea that I had already positioned myself to seize it all. The more she pushed, the closer I got to my endgame. Brad, on the other hand, was acting strangely. His silence was unsettling, but I knew he wasn't going to sit back and let me take everything without a fight. I wasn't sure if he was aware of what I had uncovered, but I knew he was too involved to let me take the lead without some kind of challenge. The question was whether he was going to play along, or if he would try to sabotage my plans. Either way, I couldn't afford to trust him. I decided it was time to confront him. We met at a small, secluded cafe in town. It was the perfect place, quiet, discreet, away from the watchful eyes of the family. As soon as I sat down, I could feel the tension between us. Brad wasn't looking at me, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him. He was waiting for me to speak, but I was determined to keep him on edge. "You've been avoiding me," I said, breaking the silence. He didn't look up, but I saw his fingers twitch nervously. "I've been busy," he muttered. "Busy with what?" I pressed. "What's been going on, Brad? Why do you look like you're hiding something?" He finally glanced at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. He was hiding something. I could tell. "It's complicated," he replied, his voice low. "You wouldn't understand." I leaned in closer. "Try me." For a moment it seemed like he might say something, but then he faltered, pulling back. "I can't, okay? Just don't make this harder than it needs to be." I knew I was getting to him. I wasn't going to back down. "You've been involved in this all along, haven't you?" I asked, my voice steady. "You knew about the insurance policy, about the will. You knew everything, and you've been playing your cards close to your chest." Brad hesitated, his eyes darting around the cafe, as if searching for a way out. But there was no escape. He had already been caught in his own lie. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice shaky. "I was just trying to protect myself." "Protect yourself?" I scoffed. "By hiding behind lies and deceit? You've been playing the victim, Brad, but you've been a part of this from the start." He finally met my gaze, and for a brief moment I saw the guilt in his eyes. "I didn't want this," he said softly. "I didn't want any of this." But I wasn't listening. "Too late for regrets now," I said, standing up from the table. "You've already made your choices, Brad, and so have I." I left him sitting there, alone with his guilt. The truth was out, but there was still one more person I had to confront, Lauren. She had been the biggest obstacle all along, the one who thought she could take everything without anyone noticing. I was ready to show her just how wrong she was. That night, I made the call. My lawyer was ready. The papers were drafted, and the plan was set in motion. Everything had to be timed perfectly. I wasn't about to let Lauren get away with any of it. I met her the next morning at the property. She was standing in front of the house, clipboard in hand, giving orders to the contractors. When she saw me, she froze. There was something in the way she looked at me, something calculating. She knew what was coming, but she wasn't ready for it. "You've been busy," I said, walking up to her. "I've been busy too." She narrowed her eyes, but her tone was calm. "I'm not in the mood for games." "Then you'll be in for a real surprise," I said, holding up the legal papers. "You've been making all these plans, but you forgot one thing. You don't have control anymore." Her eyes widened as she looked down at the papers. She stepped back, clearly thrown off balance. "What is this?" "It's the end of your little game, Lauren," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't think I knew, but I've been watching. I've been keeping track of every step you've taken, and now it's time to put everything in motion." She stood there, frozen, as the weight of my words settled in, but she wasn't going down without a fight. "You can't do this," she said, her voice rising. "You can't just take everything from me." "I already have," I replied coldly, "and now it's your turn to lose." The final step of the plan had been set into motion. There was no turning back now. The pieces were in place, and I had made my move. The family would never be the same again, and as for Brad and Lauren, they would learn that their manipulation and deceit had consequences. Now, it was time for the fallout, and I would be ready for whatever came next. As I left the property, the weight of what I had just set in motion settled over me. I had never been one to shy away from confrontation, but this was different. The stakes were high. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about power. It was about claiming what was rightfully mine, taking control of the narrative, and making sure no one ever underestimated me again. But as I sat in my car, driving away from the scene, a thought gnawed at the back of my mind. What if Lauren fought back? What if Brad turned on me? I'd prepared for every contingency I could think of, but in the back of my mind, I knew that nothing was certain. The following week, things moved quickly. Lauren hired a lawyer, of course. She'd always been good at playing the game, at putting on a facade of confidence, but I could see through it. The lawyer she hired was experienced, sharp, someone who could fight dirty if need be. But I was ready. I'd made sure the evidence was airtight. My lawyer had already done the groundwork. There was no way she could win. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how deep the web of lies went. I wasn't just up against Lauren anymore. I was up against a whole system, a system that had been rigged for years to keep people like me in the dark, to keep the truth buried. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I had already taken the first step to uncover the truth. Now, I was going to make sure it all came crashing down. Lauren, as expected, wasn't backing down without a fight. The court documents came in, and she accused me of everything under the sun: fraud, manipulation, coercion. It was laughable. She had no idea what she was dealing with. I had everything documented, every conversation, every transaction. And then there was the most damning piece of evidence of all, the recordings. The ones that proved she had been lying about the will, about the estate, about everything. The battle between us escalated quickly. Lawyers exchanged letters, documents were filed. It was like a game of chess, but the stakes were higher than I ever imagined. Lauren's lawyer tried to intimidate me with threats, but I wasn't fazed. I had played this game before. What they didn't know was that I had an ace up my sleeve. Brad. He was the wild card. I'd known all along that he'd be a problem, but I hadn't expected him to make his move this early. One afternoon, I received a call from him, his voice trembling with fear. "I need to talk to you," he said, his words rushed. "It's about Lauren. She's not who you think she is." "Save it," I snapped. "I don't have time for your games." "No, you don't understand," he insisted. "She's been planning something bigger than you think. She's been talking to people, dangerous people. You have to stop her." My heart raced as I listened to him. This wasn't just about a family squabble anymore. It was bigger. "What people?" I asked, my voice hard. "I don't know all the details, but I think she's been making deals with the contractor, someone she's working with. They're trying to force a sale of the property. They've been setting things up behind your back, and they've already got buyers lined up." It hit me like a bolt of lightning. If Lauren was selling the property without my knowledge, she was planning to profit off my inheritance, cutting me out completely. I had to act fast. This was no longer just about winning the estate. It was about stopping her from ruining everything. "Where is she now?" I demanded. "I don't know," Brad said, sounding even more desperate. "But I've seen the paperwork. She's not going to back down. She's got the support of those buyers already. If you don't act quickly, you'll lose everything." "Don't worry, I'll handle it," I said, trying to sound calm. But inside, my mind was racing. I couldn't let this happen. I hung up, my mind made up. I couldn't just play defense anymore. It was time to go on the offense. I called my lawyer immediately and instructed them to prepare a motion for an emergency hearing. We needed to get ahead of Lauren before she could make any moves. The next day, I took the matter to court. I was going in with everything I had: evidence, recordings, financial records, and most importantly, the undeniable truth. The judge needed to see just how far Lauren had gone to manipulate the situation, to cut me out of my inheritance and cheat me out of what was rightfully mine. The courtroom was packed. Lauren was sitting at the table across from me, her lawyer at her side, both of them looking calm, but with an edge of desperation in their eyes. I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. I had the upper hand now. When the hearing began, my lawyer laid out the facts. Every document, every recording was presented. Lauren's attempts to undermine me were exposed for all to see. There was no denying what she had done. She could try to claim she was in the right, but the evidence spoke for itself. Lauren's lawyer tried to interrupt, to cast doubt on my claims, but it was no use. The truth was clear. The court was on my side. As the judge listened carefully, Lauren's composure began to crack. She tried to regain control, but it was too late. The weight of her lies was too heavy. The final ruling came swiftly. Given the evidence presented and the severity of the situation, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff, the judge announced. All claims against the inheritance are dismissed. The estate will be awarded to the rightful heir. I sat there, stunned for a moment, letting the words sink in. It was over. I had won. But the victory felt hollow. The battle had been long, and I knew there would still be fallout. Lauren wouldn't take this lightly. But for now, I had what was mine, and I would make sure it stayed that way. As I walked out of the courtroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The battle was won, yes, but the war was far from over. Lauren's eyes had burned with fury when the judgment was read aloud. I could see the fury and resentment bubbling beneath her calm exterior. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about control, pride, and power, and I knew she wouldn't let go easily. I had to keep my guard up. Lauren had always been a master at manipulating the system, and even though the court had ruled in my favor, I wasn't naive enough to think she would just walk away. There was more at stake than property. There were deep-seated emotions involved, and when it came to people like her, they would stop at nothing to reclaim what they thought was theirs. But for now, I had a moment to breathe. I had won the first round, and that meant I could take a step back, assess the situation, and plan my next move carefully. Back at home, I tried to relax, but my mind kept racing. My phone buzzed, another message from Brad. It was short and to the point. "She's not done yet. Be ready for the next round." I wasn't surprised. In fact, I had expected it. Lauren was persistent, and if she felt like she was being cornered, she would lash out in ways I couldn't predict. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. The next few days were filled with tension as I continued to prepare for the next phase. Lauren had already started making calls. I could tell from the subtle changes in the way people treated me. The pressure was mounting. But I had my own network, my own connections, and I knew how to use them. I wasn't alone in this fight. Then, one morning, I received a call that I wasn't prepared for. It was from my lawyer, and their voice was grave. "We've just been informed that Lauren is planning to appeal the decision. She's claiming that the court was biased and that the evidence we presented was incomplete. She's got a team of new lawyers working on it, and they're already drafting the paperwork." I felt my stomach drop. This was exactly what I had feared. I had known she wouldn't give up, but hearing it from my lawyer made it all too real. "They're not going to win this," I said, my voice hard. "We have the evidence. We have the court's ruling. There's no way she's getting a second chance at this." "I agree," my lawyer replied, "but we have to be prepared for the worst. She's not just going to walk away quietly. This could drag on for months. You need to be ready for a battle in the appellate courts." I could hear the concern in their voice. It wasn't just the legal paperwork I had to worry about now. This was about stamina. It was about how much I was willing to endure, how far I was willing to go to make sure this wasn't just a temporary victory. Lauren was relentless, and if I wasn't careful, she would use every tool at her disposal to drag this out. The days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, the situation became more intense. Lauren's appeal was officially filed, and I could already tell that she was pulling every string she had left. This wasn't going to be a quick resolution. It would take time, strategy, and more resources than I had initially expected. I wasn't going to let her win. Not after everything I had been through. Not after all the effort I had put into securing what was mine. I started preparing my counter-strategy. This wasn't just about fighting a legal battle anymore. It was about showing Lauren that I was stronger than she thought. I started gathering more evidence, reaching out to people who could testify about her behavior, her manipulation tactics. I needed everything I could get. And I knew it wasn't just about winning the case. It was about making sure she knew she had lost. Weeks later, The appeal hearing finally arrived. The courtroom was packed once again, the tension palpable. Lauren's new team of lawyers was well prepared, their arguments smooth and calculated. They tried to paint me as a villain, someone who had used manipulation to seize control of what wasn't rightfully mine. But as I sat there, listening to them twist the truth, I remained calm. My evidence was solid. My case was airtight. They could lie all they wanted, but it wouldn't change the fact that I was in the right. When it was my turn to speak, I stood confidently, my lawyer by my side. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply laid out the truth. I showed the court the full extent of what Lauren had done. I presented the recordings, the documents, the testimonies. Every piece of evidence backed my claim. The judge listened attentively, his eyes narrowing as the facts were laid bare. I could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a turning point. As the hearing came to a close, the judge made his ruling. There was no question. The appeal was denied. Lauren had lost again. The relief that washed over me was almost overwhelming. But as I left the courtroom, I knew this wasn't the end. This had been a battle, but there was more to come. I had won the legal fight, but the emotional toll had been immense. And I couldn't help but wonder, what would Lauren do next? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. Lauren's face had been a mix of disbelief and rage when the judge handed down his final ruling. There was something in the way she looked at me that suggested this wasn't over. She wasn't someone who accepted defeat easily. Back at home, I tried to relax, but the unease lingered. The phone buzzed again. It was Brad. "She's planning something big. Be careful." That simple message sent a chill down my spine. I had won in court, but in Lauren's world, the game didn't end with a court ruling. Her need for control and revenge would drive her to keep fighting, no matter the cost. She was dangerous when cornered. I knew that firsthand. The next few days were spent in constant preparation. I couldn't afford to let my guard down. My lawyer kept me updated, but I could see the toll it was taking on her too. She had been with me through every step of this battle, and even though we had the law on our side, Lauren's unpredictable nature made the situation volatile. Then came the letter. It arrived without warning, dropped off by an unmarked courier. The envelope was thick, sealed with a wax stamp. My heart skipped a beat as I tore it open, scanning the contents. It was a cease and desist letter, but not just any letter. This one was different. It wasn't just about the inheritance or the estate. It was a threat. Lauren had made it clear that if I didn't back down, she would expose every detail of my life, every flaw, every mistake. She threatened to turn everything upside down, to take everything I had left. She was willing to go to the press, to make me the villain in a public spectacle. And worse, she claimed that I had cheated my way into the inheritance in the first place. The words hit hard, but I didn't flinch. I had expected this. I had always known that Lauren's wrath wouldn't stop until she had destroyed me completely. But I was prepared. More prepared than she realized. That night, I went over my files, reviewing everything. The evidence, the documents, the recordings, everything I had painstakingly gathered over the months. I had an ace in the hole, something that could destroy her, something so damaging that she would never recover from it. But it wasn't enough to just sit on it. I had to act. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "We need to move fast," I said, voice steady but urgent. "I'm going to play my hand. I need to send her a message that she can't ignore." The plan was set into motion. I knew exactly where Lauren's secrets were buried. I had always suspected there were more skeletons in her closet, things she'd carefully hidden from the world. It was time to expose them, publicly. I had arranged for a private investigator to dig deeper into her background, and what they found shocked me. Lauren had been embezzling money from multiple family members for years, setting up false accounts, funneling money into offshore accounts. It was a web of lies, and it was all out in the open now. The next day, I contacted the press. Within hours, the story broke. The details of Lauren's financial fraud, her manipulation of the family, and her deceitful schemes were all over the news. I didn't release everything at once. I left just enough to keep her guessing, to keep her on the defensive. But as the story gained traction, I could feel the weight of the situation shift. The phone calls started coming in. First, it was from family members, expressing shock and disbelief. Then came the legal threats, but I was ready for them. My lawyer had already prepared the countersuit, and the evidence was irrefutable. Every move I made was calculated. It wasn't long before Lauren's world began to crumble. The press hounded her, people she had once trusted turned against her, and the weight of the scandal became too much to bear. Her once powerful allies began to distance themselves, and the legal consequences of her actions were catching up to her. Then, a week later, I got the call I had been waiting for. Lauren was arrested. The charges were serious: fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. She was facing years in prison, and this time, there was no way out. Her empire of lies had collapsed. As I sat in my office, looking out the window at the city skyline, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The battle had been long, draining, and at times, it felt like I was fighting a never-ending war. But in the end, justice had prevailed. The truth had come to light, and Lauren's reign of manipulation and control was over. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to feel the weight of everything lifting off my shoulders. But deep down, I knew this had been more than just a victory over Lauren. It had been a victory over everything she stood for: greed, deceit, and the belief that power could control people. And for once, I felt like I had finally regained my life.